For as the lightning cometh, Part 1. Matthew chapter 24, KJV, verse 30. And then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven, and then shall all the tribes of the earth mourn, and they shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. Verse 31. And he shall send his angels with a great sound of a trumpet, and they shall gather together his elect from the four winds, from one end of heaven to the other. There is only one sign in Matthew chapter 24 that will signal the second coming of Jesus Christ, and that sign is in verse 30. That sign has been an unknown sign till I revealed it as the Lamb. I will reveal further details about this Lamb as the sign of the Son of Man in heaven in the course of my videos, where along with the Lamb something else and horrifying will be witnessed by all the tribes of the earth, by which sight will end the world in a global panic and madness. The rapture is often preached as without warning or anything that will signal it. This is a false preaching. By simply reading Matthew chapter 24 verse 30 with no need to interpret anything, one reads that the rapture in verse 31 is no surprise event. Matthew chapter 24 KJV verse 30. And then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven, and then shall all the tribes of the earth mourn, and they shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. In Matthew chapter 24 verse 30, what precedes the second coming of Jesus Christ in verse 30 is a sign seen in heaven, witnessed by all the tribes of the earth, and the sign causes everyone to mourn. We see this in verse 30, preceding the second coming of Jesus Christ in that same verse 30. In Matthew chapter 24 verse 30, we read of at least three events preceding the second coming of Jesus Christ in verse 30, and the rapture in verse 31. A sign that will appear in heaven, the witnessing of the sign by all the tribes of the earth, the mourn of all the tribes of the earth at the sight of the sign. And this is before the second coming of Jesus Christ in verse 30, and before the rapture in verse 31. And before that the sign of the Son of Man appears in heaven in verse 30, witnessed by all the tribes of the earth, we have verse 29. And from what we read in verse 29, whether understood literally or interpreted, what we read in that verse appears catastrophic on global proportions. Matthew chapter 24 verse 29 KJV, verse 29. Immediately after the tribulation of those days shall the sun be darkened, and the moon shall not give her light, and the stars shall fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens shall be shaken. My question is, how can we have church authorities and many pastors preaching the rapture as a surprise event without any warning sign, when from what we read in Matthew chapter 24 verse 30, that the second coming of Jesus Christ is preceded by at least three events, all witnessed by every human being on earth, without speaking of verse 29. How? Simple. By distorting the meaning of verse 27, preached as that of a secret coming of Jesus, appearing and disappearing, as that of a lightning cometh out of the east and shineth to west, and in that split second appearing and disappearing, or as in a twinkling of an eye, as often preached, Jesus raptures the church, it disappearing from the earth. Matthew chapter 24 verse 27 KJV. For as the lightning cometh out of the east and shineth even unto the west, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. The problem with the interpretation that has an appearing and disappearing Jesus, as in that of a lightning cometh and gone, is that from what we read in Matthew chapter 24 verse 30, without speaking of verse 29 and verse 31, we cannot have so much being witnessed inasmuch that of a lightning cometh and gone, with the interpretation that these so-called church authorities give of verse 27, that of an appearing and disappearing Jesus in a split second, and in that twinkling of an eye, Jesus raptures the church into heaven. Unless these church authorities are willingly adding some other coming of Jesus with rapture of no Bible claim from that of verse 30 and 31. But why would they do this? I could give a list of reasons for this behavior of church authorities, and none are for church reasons. And all are that of some personal interest of the pastor preaching these false preachings, without speaking of the huge success that these preachings create, in both of that of creating huge followings for the pastor. As books, they are bestsellers, and at least for church people, some success in the movie industry. And all this from a false interpretation of Matthew chapter 24, verse 27. A false interpretation, purposely created for basically the following reasons: to simplify rapture preachings so that to have everyone understand the rapture or have it easily understood, to have the pastor grab his followers' attention to himself for obvious personal monetary interest or other personal gains, to have the pastor create an atmosphere of constant vigilance from his followers, so to keep them under his constant control, to give claim to other false preachings in Bible end-time prophecy, to present the rapture, not just that of an escape of the church from some evil that threatens the survival of the church, but also that of an escape from life's troubles and miseries, to preach a false coming of Jesus with rapture of no Bible claim apart from that of Matthew chapter 24, verse 30 and 31, so to have the pastor create a following in this present time, presenting this rapture as something hidden and mysterious that could come any moment, soon, and not far in the future. Apart from that rapture, we read in verse 31, which obviously appears in a future nowhere soon. We are yet to see verse 15 fulfilled, and the rapture in verse 31. Distort the meaning of Matthew chapter 24, verse 27, have it understood as a secret or a hidden coming of Jesus in a split-second timing, or of that of a twinkling of an eye, appearing and disappearing, and in that fraction of a second, Jesus raptures the church without anything signaling it, that it could be any moment. And you would not only add to Scripture another coming of Jesus with rapture. From that coming of Jesus with rapture we read in verse 30 and 31, but even preachings of multiple raptures. Preach that Matthew chapter 24, verse 27 has some other meaning from that of its true meaning, and you will soon realize that every preaching in Bible end-time prophecy that you are preaching becomes questionable and raises only doubts, and has the world laugh at your preachings, which are not only false, but even blasphemous. In this study in 4 parts, I will reveal that the coming of Jesus with rapture is no surprise event. There is no appearing and disappearing coming of Jesus in a split second of that of a twinkling of an eye. That every preaching of this coming of Jesus with rapture in a twinkling of an eye is false. This includes rapture left behind movies and every literature and preaching, and who's preaching this coming of Jesus with rapture from that distorted interpretation of Matthew chapter 24, verse 27, is only deceiving his followers. I will reveal that the coming of Jesus with rapture is preceded by events, all witnessed by everyone on earth. Some events even minutes before the rapture, and finally the true meaning of Matthew chapter 24, verse 27. This is end of part 1.